beliefs of education activity and the aims of education, where you rank ordered those and put both of these together in a philosophy. Let's analyze how you did. So well, in looking at the beliefs of education, we ask you 24 different statements to check those things that you believe. And it was a simple attempt to sort of gauge whether or not, based on these simple statements, you would do well on the Gallup Teacher Perceiver and other effective schools instruments that many of our superintendents and principals are using to select teachers for their classrooms. They did, over a span of time and several studies, research that came up with the characteristics of teachers that would make it into the American classrooms. And from that, they have a battery of questions which we really can't legally give you, but through written interviews, when you fill out your application, many of the questions are asked there, and then also either in a face-to-face or a telephone interview, they will assess 12 different domains. And what our little instrument did in our statements was to sort of cipher the differences between the traditional and the more effective schools-oriented indicators that Gallup was seeking. In a broad sense, the Gallup Teacher Perceiver looks at different domains, and we're not going to, and I can't hit these specifically, other than to say what they are and what their goal is in each of the domains. But first one is looking at the mission of the teacher. Is there a belief of that teacher that they're going to teach every kid and the students are going to grow and to obtain self-actualization? So you're going to teach more than a textbook. And secondly, empathy. Is there a capacity in that teacher to apprehend and accept the other person as they are? Sometimes we call that in Rogerian counseling unconditional regard. Is there a drive to develop rapport with each student, even the ones that are hard to teach? Every kid is going to learn and be accepted, and we're going to make attempts to develop that rapport with them. The fourth one is their individualized perception of teaching. Is it the teacher's responsibility to teach to the class or to personalize each student's program so every kid learns, even though it takes a little bit more time or in a different style? Do they have the capacity to listen to others and to be responsive and accepting as they listen? Is there a capacity to invest in a child's growth, to seek satisfaction when you do see each individual child achieve? Is there a drive to search for new ideas, to develop new methods and materials? Is the teacher capable of motivating, of stimulating kids to think and respond, to feel, and to learn, to activate learning? The eighth one, to be innovative, to try new ideas and techniques, and always be on the lookout to do those, to be a risk taker, and to be creative, to do new things. And the Gestalt theme deals with the teacher wanting everything to go right, to seek perfection in all that they do, moving from the individual child to even the structure of the classroom. Is there objectivity? Do they act on impulse, or do they go for the facts and try to understand the entire situation before they act? And then last, is there a philosophical direction, a focus of that teacher as they develop personally in their profession? So these 12 domains comprise the themes of this instrument, and there are other instruments not as sophisticated, but they go after these core effective school beliefs. And so what we've tried to do in this activity was to look at the different traditional beliefs and those that our principals and superintendents wanting to move their schools forward are looking for in their teachers. So let's see how you did by analyzing each one of these. Number 2 asks you if you agreed with the bell-shaped curve as the best indicators to predict the distribution of grades at a given school. I do have some colleagues in higher ed that believe that academic rigor is to sort kids, to decide who are the A students, the C students, and the F students. But in our newer schools, it's not so much that we're going to look to sort kids, but that all kids are going to learn. And one of the key themes that superintendents and principals go after is, does that teacher in their heart believe that every kid's going to learn, and they're going to learn it well, even though it may take a lot of time, but they're going to learn that intended curriculum. And without that as basic number 1, chances are we've had some superintendents say they just won't consider you if you really don't believe in your heart that you're going to teach every kid. And they have certain tricks to get that answer from you, estimate how many you might perceive would fail your class and the like. But in the real world, it's maybe doesn't happen. But the beliefs, the philosophy that you will make it happen to the best of your ability is paramount in the belief system of the newer schools. Another question was external factors such as the home environment determine learning. And I don't think there's any doubt that we could argue that if a child's dog dies that evening, they come to school, they'd be upset, or if the child was abused, it will impinge upon what happens that day or that week. Perhaps there are a lot of external factors that impinge upon learning, but in the overall scheme of things, it doesn't play the major determining factor of that. In the newer schools, we're replacing this with teachers' cause learning. They can create environments that can overcome some of the poor home situations that Coleman found in his report, that the single determining factor of whether or not a child achieved in the American school was their socioeconomic status. So our schools that are looking to move forward are looking for teachers that don't use that as an excuse, but really believe that they can make a difference no matter where the child comes from. And I guess this leads to the Coleman report indicator. The economic level of the student's parents is the greatest single predictor of student behavior. And we sometimes see that in school systems throughout America, where we see higher achievement in those schools that have a student population with a higher income. But in the effective schools, in those places that we're trying to make a difference, principals are looking for those teachers that believe, again, that they themselves are the greatest single predictor of what a teacher does. The greatest single predictor of student behavior is teacher behavior. And you know, our student teachers a lot of times will go have to do a shadow study, and they go spend the whole day kind of following a student. They go from classroom to classroom, and one of the things they see consistently coming back, that they see some classrooms that they have a great classroom management, and others that are almost near chaos. And they find very quickly, as we analyze factors, that it is not so much sometimes the kids that create that environment, but it is what the teacher does to create that environment. So a big one in most of the instruments is to finding out where is the locus of control. Is it with the teacher, or is it with the students? One of the beliefs you were asked is competition between students, the best way to motivate students and prepare them for the dog-eat-dog world. Well, what we found that in the research and in schools that are trying to make progress with kids, it's not putting them into competition to where you have winners or losers, but to breed success. Because we found that over and over again, as a coach, I found that losing begets losing and winning begets winning. And kids, just as I've seen them develop through the season, the winners look for ways to win, and the losers tend to find ways to lose. And the same it is maybe with success. Success truly does breed success. So it's almost like a scaffolding approach. That teachers structure opportunities for each student to be successful, and to treat every kid the same. Sometimes you have to treat them differently, but they reward that success, and that reward, you attract more bees with honey, and that reward encourages further learning. The belief that students should, or schools should prepare students for specific jobs and success has always been around in college. We had in the 50s, 60s, major federal money going into the Eisenhower grants and vocational ed and the like. And as we've approached businesses now, we found that they want certain characteristics of their workers, that almost all jobs will require some post-secondary training. So it's being replaced with not so much preparing a kid to be a welder or a bricklayer, but to be able to think, to know how to learn and to solve problems. And those sound like simple things, but tremendously hard in a K through 12 curriculum to implement and to assess. The belief that what is learned in school should be broken down into curriculum areas such as reading, writing, arithmetic is very traditional. We, secondary school, have the Carnegie unit. But as we look at learning, and we look at theories, and we look at schools that are radically changing, we're finding that it's the benchmarks, the learner outcomes that are integrated throughout the curriculum that really determine the instructional program. It's not so much that we teach them read or write or arithmetic, but it is the outcomes. What is it that we want those kids to be like, to know, to be able to do when they graduate from that school? And so you're teaching to the objective and measuring those objectives, and want teachers to sort of align with that in the new effective schools. So many times that the idea of an educated person was how much we could put into their head, what they knew, if they could name all 50 capitals, or if they could spell correctly, or if they knew certain dates in American history. And so it was a quantity of ideas, and it followed that schools should teach an entire curriculum. It was the job of the kid to keep up with that. If they didn't, it was more their fault. And now we're looking at balancing that a little bit more, and with quality over quantity. Not that you have to teach the entire book from page 1 to the last book, but sometimes to reach your kids, to reach the benchmarks, you can't teach everything, but what you decide is important, you're going to make sure you teach it well, and that it may take more time for others, and exploration may be called for those that learn it quickly, but learning's a matter of time, and it's quality over just teaching everything, the quantity. The old belief that learning can be assessed by the distribution of student grades and norm reference tests, where we could measure how a kid did with another 100 kids, a standard way that we used to make judgments about school systems in the early 60s, 70s, and that's kind of been replaced with the idea that it's not so much grades, but it's multiple techniques, multiple types of criteria-based reference tests. That learning is a matter of style, and so sometimes for kids to show that they learned that material, there are other multiple ways that we can assess those techniques, and schools are becoming very creative in offering those authentic assessments, as well as performing on the state-mandated test. The idea that kids are naturally lazy and will fail no matter what the teacher does and school does for them has always been around, and sometimes when you look at my 3 kids as they grew up, it's hard not to believe, but we want teachers that are in front of those kids to have that belief that every kid is born wanting to succeed, and they can be motivated. Sometimes it's just hard to find that way to motivate them, but we want that teacher that believes that she will try and try and try until she can find something that works to motivate that kid to want to succeed. The belief that schools should be content-centered has always prevailed. In fact, we even train teachers to, in the secondary field, to teach the content. We teach English, history, and the like, but we're seeing now a much stronger move to balance that to where we are student-centered. That is, we're going to teach content, but we're going to center it on the kid, that sometimes we're going to have to alter or modify or accommodate that child in a different learning style, or perhaps alter the time to provide a structure that does get him to learn, to help him become more confident. And we want teachers that believe that they have that capacity to do that. So a number of different changes that our principals are looking at. How'd you do? If you looked at that instrument, all of the odd number questions, 1, 3, if you go down through there, were the Gallup indicators, effective schools beliefs. And if you probably embed that in your behavior and your everyday activities, I think you would do, at least by the research, real well in your career. Again, some of them are highly controversial, and you'll find argument amongst teachers about what you should believe, but at least the instruments tend to tell us that these are things they're looking at for the job interview. Well, another thing we look at is your primary purpose of education. What's the primary aim? And here we ask you to rank order 8 kind of traditional statements. And again, it's hard to say one is more important than the other, but we tend to find schools emphasizing more some of these. And kind of illustrate that for you, but they are sort of different philosophical beliefs also. And let's take them a little bit one at a time, but almost always the pragmatist or the humanistic philosophy at the bottom comes out number one in the 20 years that I've given this out, that schools actually freedom means choice, and so a man has no education. A man with no education may believe all or nothing that he hears or reads, but education will provide him with the confidence, creativity, communication skills to make intelligent choices in all areas of his life. Tends almost always to be number one with teachers. When we give this to parents, however, you're going to find money success coming much higher, and for teachers that's sometimes ranked eighth. But there is a problem when teachers see that that's not a number one aim or a major aim, but parents do. And I might ask you that are taking this course, what is the reason that you are taking it? I'd love for you to say it's because of intelligent choice. It's going to give you a knowledge base to do better. But actually, it's for money success. That is, to move up on the pay scale and to give you some ideas to make you successful. One of the primary ones that come out high for the parochial or religious schools is truth. You'll find that the primary purpose many times of a religious school is truth, that knowledge should be valued for its own sake, because in knowledge there is wisdom, and education should teach those things that have been true for all people for all time. Well, where do we get that? Well, that would be those things that Catholicism would teach, or if it's a Methodist school, a Christian belief background, but to teach the general truths in life as they were perceived by that school system. So those become very close to being one or two in a private school, and many times what family want to be very high in the ranking. In our foreign schools, when our Chinese and Taiwanese and Korean students come over, they will find that they rank number one or two citizenship, because it is in many of the foreign countries one of the primary purpose of the public school is to build their country, and it teaches them to be informed, reliable, and loyal citizens. And so citizenship, highly important for many of our foreign schools. If you look at schools that are developing, like tech centers and the like, job skills becomes number one focus, or a big focus. Man is happiest when he knows he's done a skillful job, so people should teach those things or should be taught those things that help them find an occupation to do their work better. Those many times we start those sometimes in secondary ed, but then they're fully implemented and taught in post-secondary training. We find typically history and culture being in the top four ratings of most teachers. It is highly important to teach about the past so we don't make the same mistakes. But yet when you look at the testing system of No Child Left Behind, we haven't seen that as one of the major core curriculum areas. Behavior and family come into play for many parents as they take this survey. And perhaps behavior for the private school is oftentimes the number two area that society is held together by right behavior. So education should teach people to be good, honest, and upright human beings. And I'm seeing, in my opinion, in the last 10 years, a strong move towards character education, teaching kids certain values that are safe values like honesty and reliability and integrity and those things that the workforce will want taught. So all of these aims also could be connected to philosophical beliefs. The pragmatist, the idealist, the essentialist, the progressives, the humanists, the reconstructionists, all kind of promote one or more of these in their philosophy. So, but it gives you a good flavor for at least 8 different orientations to the aims of ed. So as you think about those, considering both those aims and your beliefs about teaching, write your philosophy that's kind of semi-comprehensive about what you believe, about what's your primary purpose of education, and then as a teacher, of what you believe about teaching. And I think it would serve you well to spend some time on this, because in all honesty, as we interact as teacher trainers with various superintendents and principals, though you may think it's corny, they are very big on getting teachers that really believe internally these things. And so for you to be able to write it down and then talk about it, I think for those of you that haven't gotten a job, would be tremendously important. And I think for those of you that have taught for any great length of time, if you had one that you developed your early teacher training, then wrote one now, and if you could find that old one, compare the two, I think you'll see a difference as you go through the different stages of teaching. So hope it gave you some insight. Yeah, I don't expect you to agree with all of those things, but that's what philosophy is all about. We all have different aims and beliefs, and it's what makes a good school system. Sometimes we have some great variation in what our teachers do and believe, and think that's good.